Do you struggle with finding a good literature curriculum for your homeschool student? Or maybe you just struggle with discussing literature yourself. You want to dive deep into all the themes and you want to be able to pull out all the things the authors want to pull out of you, but your education itself was lacking. And so literary analysis, not your strong suit. Well, enter IEW's Teaching the Classics. That's where I found myself because I had done 4 years of classical conversations, and that is like the whole premise of that particular homeschool co-op conversation, because it was created because Lee Borton's homeschooling her own children. They were in a book club, and she realized these high schoolers do not know how to discuss literature. But anyway, this isn't about classical conversations, but it is about discussing literature and how this can teach you to do just that. So I'm going to show you how it works and also how we used it, because there's many ways that you can adapt this program from IEW. My name is Rachel. If you are new here, I have 3 children, a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 17-year-old, and I've been homeschooling for a while. just gonna say, and I've tried a lot of things. And this was one of the things that I actually bought to help me, because one of the things that I struggle with literature curriculum or any sorts of language arts curriculum is maybe I don't care for the books that have been chosen for that curriculum, and maybe I want to do my own books, or maybe I want my children to read different books that have been recommended, but I've never read them myself, so I might have to go through it with them. So that's why I got this, because this could be for teaching the teacher. So you as homeschool mom could go through this. I chose to go through it with all of my kids, but really, well, let me just talk about it. I'm going to show it to you also. Okay, so first of all, this is all that it comes with. It's a very thin book, and it comes with DVDs. They're not all in here because we're still using it, but all of these DVDs, let me see, there's 8 of them. So there's like 8 sections here. I would say the DVDs are all around an hour each, and they talk about different themes. So it's all going to be mentioned in here. So you can see here the table of contents. The first DVD, the first section is Tools for Literary Analysis, Why Literature, the story chart, the children's story, and the Socratic list. So it's going to give kind of an overview of how it's going to go over this program. Next, it's going to talk about style and context, and it's going to be using Paul Revere's Ride as an example to teach this. Section 3 is all about setting, going to be using Rikki Tikki Tavi and talking about settings in adult literature. Characters, using Adventures of Tom Sawyer from Mark Twain, and then has a little brief section in there about how character is used in adult literature. Conflict and plot, using The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Theme, using Martin the Cobbler. Practicum, using Casey at Bat. And then the last section is going to be showing you how you can use this as a curriculum for literature. So once you learn how to analyze literature, you may never need a literature curriculum again. And then in the back part of this book is going to be your appendices, which has a bunch of sample questions that you can use when analyzing literature. And then reading lists. Who doesn't love good book recommendations? They have some back here. And then a glossary of terms and additional resources. So in the very beginning, it's going to show you how to use this book. It suggests students in middle school and above may enjoy watching the seminar with their teachers. And that is exactly how I have done it. I have also had my 10-year-old sit down there with us while we were doing it, because one of the coolest things about it, as it's teaching each section. So Andrew Andrews is teaching it, and he's teaching it like a seminar. So it shows him kind of lecturing and explaining, but when it uses the children's story that I mentioned, he actually reads through it, and they will flash pictures from the book onto the screen. So for example, when they did Rikki Tikki Tavi, when they did Paul Revere's Ride, I think my kids were engaged in that one too. But Rikki Tikki Tavi in particular, my 10-year-old actually put her coloring down, because she usually colors while we're watching the seminar. She put her coloring down and just like her eyes were glued, and it was just showing a few pictures here and there, but like it wasn't a video. It was just showing a picture as if you're reading a book and holding up the picture for the students to see as you're reading. And so it was fun. It was like having a read aloud on DVD. So you could totally learn by yourself, or you could totally learn with a middle schooler or a high schooler. I definitely think you could do it. And you could do that in multiple ways, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. So each of these discs, it shows you how much time is on. I think I already told you they're all about an hour each. And yep, I'm right. So whenever I did this with my kids, we usually only watched half of the DVD at a time whenever we sat down. So there's only 8 discs. There's a section 9 that shows you how you could use this. But as for the content and the doing it along with Andrew Andrews, you could do it in 16 sessions like we did it, or you could make this a longer curriculum and do a little bit more together, which I'll talk about here. Hold on. So one of the main things that he emphasizes at first is that there is more to a literary education than just vocabulary and reading comprehension, but really thinking about the themes of the story and the settings, thinking about what the author intended, which I have to say, when you're thinking about it like that, I'm like, man, these authors are so smart. They teach you how to use the Socratic method, which is a very classical term, right? It comes from Socrates, and it's teaching by asking questions. And so that's one of the appendix that I'll show you in the back. They give you example questions, because if you're like me as a teacher, you don't always know what questions to ask, especially if literary analysis is not your forte. As it's teaching, it's explaining, it's using children's stories to teach you each of these techniques, because children's stories are short and they're a little bit easier to pull the themes from than if you used a 2-inch thick novel to practice this. So the children's stories are great for practicing your literary analysis. They give you charts throughout. This one is filled in, but they'll give you charts so that as you do your own story, you could actually fill these in. This might look familiar to you if you ever did any sort of literary analysis in your school education. So one of the very first things that they teach you is thinking about historical context behind a piece of literature and acknowledging the personal history of the author. So if you've ever seen on any sort of book studies, they often will have you look up the author and who the author was about, because sometimes that'll give you insight into maybe some of the ideology that might be in there or some of the themes that they wrote about. So for example, it says when Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Huck Finn, he not only wrote during a period of racial tension and incongruity in America at large, but also from a wealth of personal experience in the culture of the Mississippi Valley. So yeah, Mark Twain wrote Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn in the late 1800s. So there's some authors in here to give you some insight, some famous authors you may recognize their names and about the time period that they wrote in. Okay, and then you've got your source text. So Paul Revere's Ride. Here's where you could do it differently. So every single section, like I pointed out, is going to have some piece of children's literature as a guide. How I did Paul Revere's Ride. Okay, we watched the first half of the DVD where Andrew Andrews kind of taught us what it was we were supposed to look for. And then I made a copy of the poem for my kids with the questions that were on the next page. So these were the questions that we were going to be going over and discussing: onomatopoeia, assonance, alliteration, imagery, personification, simile, metaphor, allusion. And they were supposed to be looking for examples of all of these from Paul Revere's Ride. I'm seeing if there's more. Yep, there's more on the back page. Symbolism, and then who is the author. So they had copies, and they were going to try to attempt to analyze the poem on their own and find at least one example for each of those things before we came back together. When we came back together, we went over it by ourselves, and then we watched the DVD and kind of compared the DVD's answers to what we had, and the DVD had a whole lot more than what we came up with. So you could do it that way if you want to give it a shot on your own and then watch the DVD. I found that to be pretty difficult to do with my middle schooler, and it was more time consuming. So if you do it that way, I would say, let's see, I said about 16 sessions. You could it depends on how often you did this. You could make it a semester course. If you're only going to do this literature portion twice a week, because I would say for each of the assignments, you would probably want to give a couple days to really think about it and maybe go over it again. So what is that? 32 lessons total then, give or take. And then maybe at the end, you pick your own book and try to do it all yourself. 32 lessons at twice a week would be 16 weeks. So you could do it as a semester course then. If at any time during this video you think to yourself, yes, I want this curriculum, I need to learn literary analysis, please use my link that I put in the description. I am an affiliate with IEW, and when you use my link, you let them know that you heard it from me and I sent you there, and I do earn a small commission, which really helps me and my family out, and I appreciate it so much. So then section 3, we're talking about setting, and they really go over this chart and how we're going to start filling it in. And these things, like, I didn't write in my book. Like I said, I just made copies of the things for my kids. We never really filled out the chart. But again, if you wanted to make this curriculum last longer, like a semester or even a year, you could definitely make copies of all these charts and make that one of the day's assignments. But I would recommend watching the first half of the DVD first, because that's where it really explains what it is that you're looking for. And then the second half is when they go over the story. So here was Rikki Tikki Tavi. See, in the book, it's just plain black and white text. But like I said, on the DVD, they're definitely putting the pictures up there of the mongoose. There's the bigger chart with all the things, and you could attempt to start talking about the climax and the conclusion and the theme and all that. But Andrew Andrews goes over all of that. And then here are the questions that he's also going to go over in the DVD. Again, you could attempt to do that on your own first and see how you do, and then he'll go over. So yeah, and then there's some examples, the settings in adult literature. So from the Iliad, from Macbeth, from Great Expectations, from To Kill a Mockingbird, some settings examples. That's pretty much how every lesson is laid out. Characters, and then the source text, and then the chart, and then the questions that you're going to go over. Where is it in adult literature? And then conflict and plot. Andrews is going to teach you about that. And then the chart, and then the source text that he's going to read. And then the questions. So, how can you make this your own? That's where the appendix comes in. Okay, so here's an example. Maybe after you go through all of the DVDs and you learn it, you could take a whack at it yourself. And here's an example schedule for you for week 1. Setting personification imagery using Rikki Tikki Tavi. Week 2, you can do the character, the irony and the foreshadowing with Tom Sawyer. But you can see the last several weeks, this is kind of going through the stories that they already have, but maybe thinking about different things. So it's like conflict and plot. They added Paul Revere's Ride here. And then at the end, try this with Huck Finn, because in the examples used in the DVDs, they're not using Huck Finn, they're using Casey at Bat. They're using Martin the Cobbler. So they give you an example of daily lesson plans you could do. This is, again, if you're going to create your own literature curriculum. Assign the reading, schedule the class discussions, suggested class discussion procedures. So before the lesson, select a series of questions from the Socratic list appropriate to the age and experience of the students. So where's the Socratic list? This is in the appendix. So if you're going to have a class discussion, this could be for if you're doing a co-op too, right? There's Appendix A. Here's the Socratic list. Look at that. So many questions just about setting. Where does the story happen? In what country or region does the story happen? What is the mood or the atmosphere of the place where the story happens? What's the weather like? When does the story happen? So they would say, don't use all of these questions, but maybe just select a few from each list because you have more than just setting that you want to talk about. You have characters. So here's all the questions that you could choose for character discussion. Conflict questions, plot questions, theme questions, and so on and so forth. So those are just like all the ideas that you could choose from. Write the questions on the board one at a time. You could have the students arrange their answers on a story worksheet. Assign a writing exercise at the final discussion. Make a writing assignment, which could be due in a rough draft. Grammar level writing assignment. So if your kids are younger, a 3-point paragraph on the plot of the story, which may be expanded into 3-paragraph essays as the student matures. So this actually reminds me a lot. This video is not about IEW writing curriculum, but it reminds me a lot of how they teach, because they teach to use keyword outlines from a source text. So right here, you could do the literary analysis and then use the IEW writing technique for your young ones to make a keyword outline and to write their paper from the keyword outline. This even says key thought outline. It even says, I just noticed this, it even says right there, Unit 3 of the Excellence in Writing program, retelling a narrative. See how it's all coming together? So anyway, that's for lower level. Logic level writing. Now this is very classical terms, I have to say. Grammar, logic, rhetoric. Grammar level students are the ones who are just learning facts. You just tell them what to do. They're great at memorizing. The logic level, that's going to be your middle schoolers, your preteens and your teenagers who are beginning to debate ideas and question everything. And your rhetoric level writing, that's going to be more like your 10, 11, 12th grader who, when you're rhetorical, it means you have the ability to teach it. Like you're the one facilitating the discussion, you're leading it, okay? So that's these level writers. So for logic level, for your preteens and teenagers, a key thought outline, a critique, as per Unit 9 in the IEW writing lesson, a literary critique that's taught. Page-long answers to questions from the Socratic list, so you could give them all of those questions up front and then make them write very good, solid paragraphs. An essay identifying and arguing for a specific protagonist. And then a rhetorical level assignment. An introduction might be one theme or name of the book here, naming a theme the author uses, such as such and such elements to illustrate his theme based upon the evidence and the author's perspective on this theme. Compare and contrast, dealing with the characters in a particular work, or a persuasive essay. Now, if you watched my video, IEW versus Lost Tools of Writing, I feel like Lost Tools of Writing is really good at teaching persuasive writing. I'm pretty sure the higher level IEW writing curriculums also teach persuasive writing. I just haven't personally run across it yet. But persuasive writing, like should the character have done this, and then you argue points why they should or why they shouldn't have, and you could use, you could pull in your own morals, your own experience. I often, through Lost Tools, when I helped my son, we would pull in biblical truths to persuade. But yeah, this is like, you could pick your own books. You've got all the things you need here to create your curriculum, and then you could even incorporate it into writing based off of what you've learned from IEW or some other writing curriculum. And then they've got the blank story chart back here. So every book or every assignment, you wanted a blank story chart to reproduce. There's your questions. And here is your book lists. This actually kind of reminds me of Honey for a Child's Heart. Some of these are going to be the same. So stories for young children. See Jan Brett. Those are picture books. The Mitten, Stone Soup, The Carrot Seed, Where the Wild Things Are, The Polar Express, juvenile fiction, Little Women, Mr. Popper's Penguins, The Indian in the Cupboard, Caddy Woodlawn, The Secret Garden, Henry and Ribsy, The Hardy Boys, Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, The Moffats, Johnny Tremaine, Old Yeller. Lots of good book recommendations. Where the Red Friend Grows, The Bronze Bow, Heidi, The Hobbit was in there, Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and then you got high school fiction. Jane Eyre, The Canterbury Tales, Last of the Mohicans, The Scarlet Pumpernickel. So, all kinds. Got your glossary of terms. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below if that seemed overwhelming or exciting. The thought of choosing your own books to read, having great discussions with your kids, and then having them write about it. Using the IEW writing curriculum, which, if you want to learn more about, check out this video right here. And for more about any IEW products or other language arts, check out right here. Till next time, bye.